Good afternoon, Sean here, Mountains Garage. A friend of mine who I met through this channel, who happens to live local, dropped off a brand new AFR, Airflow Research, dual plane small block Chevy intake, and a bag of induction solution fogger nozzles. Wanted to know if I'd combine them together. I was a nitrous racer. I hadn't planned on being a nitrous racer, but I built a 572 Chevy. My goal was to run Tot Sportsman in my orange Camaro. You've seen the picture in the background. I had a 5-speed Lenco and a used Mountain Motor Pro Stock clutch built by Hayes that I had Hayes rebuild and recertify. And it was so aggressive, on its lightest setting it would still bog my motor and it would pick up and run 820. So I knew I was close, but I had to get rid of the bog, and more power was the answer. My combination worked out after I installed an NOS fogger. I had about a week. I knew nothing about nitrous to speak of other than messing with a couple of plate systems a long time before this was going on. At the time, Monty Smith was still alive. Online, he would give you a phone number. He was the NOS rep. And you could call and ask him any question you wanted. So I looked at a few other brands, ended up buying NOS. I set it all up, got ready to run it. Just for kicks, picked up the phone, dialed him up, told him my jet spread, the amount of timing I was pulling out, and he said it would probably be okay, and there's more power in it if I wanted it, if I dared to. Now, my engine wasn't built nitrous friendly. I had regular off-the-shelf JE pistons. They weren't nitrous pistons. I ran that motor almost 150 laps, if you will. And all but 4 or 5 of them were sprayed. That's when I was trying to run it without nitrous, because I wanted to just be into the high 7s, and I didn't mind being the slowest car in the class. Nitrous is addictive. It is pretty awesome when done right, and I got lucky enough that I didn't hurt any pots. I started spraying 250, that got me to 770, and then I upped it to 350, and I went 750, 179.99. I never tried putting more timing back in. I was pulling 14 degrees from a 36 total. My fuel, your tune-up before you start playing with nitrous should be spot on. And I was fortunate we towed with a golf cart so I could click the motor off, kick the clutch in, kick the motor off, and see the actual plug reading at wide open throttle, kind of like they do, when they do a plug check in NASCAR or something. I was able to click it right off with no further driving around. And my tune-up, my plugs were light brown. I was a long way from being lean, which a lot of the nitrous races run them as white as a ghost, the spark plugs. So I was really conservative, never hurt any pots. In no way am I a nitrous expert, but I happen to have the 1/16 pipe tap required to install these nozzles. The intake on my Tot Sportsman car was a Dot cast tunnel ram, and it had little bump or nitrous bosses, and that intake was cast really equal. It was nice. I'll show you this AFR intake. The bosses for the nitrous nozzles that they cast into the intake are a long ways from being level. They're all over the place. So I got an end mill chucked up, and I got to straighten that out first. What I like about these induction solution nozzles is they're long after the threads. My NOS nozzles weren't like that, and I had to counterbore the intake. So the intake was way over here just to get the nozzle down into the port. So I think these are going to be easier to do. I'm kind of glad he didn't bring me the stainless lines, because that's the hard part. Well, there's no going back if you make a mistake on this. Just like my Turbo 400 case that I leave right there to remind me of my mistake last week. So let's go over a few details and get after it. No story is complete without further useless detail. This mess of a storage situation, and in particular this bench I made on the first tier, On this bench, the only job I've ever done was to put my nitrous nozzles in my dot intake that I was just talking about. I've never done any other job. This has been a horizontal storage device ever since. You wouldn't believe that all this stuff changes every week or so, and it was only a few months ago that I actually pulled this bench out and supported it a little better because there was no support from front to back, so I added 3 supports underneath, so now it's pretty sturdy. You can jump up and down on it. And I was getting all ready to not store stuff on it, and well, you know, this is mostly all small block Chevy stuff. I have 2 engines I need to build. But let's get back on the subject. The correct drill size for a 1/16 pipe tap is 15/64. The misleading part of that is this shank on the nitrous nozzle won't go into a 15/64 hole. The next size up is 1/4 inch. So before I went and bored any holes in the intake, I took a piece of scrap aluminum. On the left is the 1/4 inch hole, on the right is a 15/64, and after I run threads through the smaller hole, the 15/64, the nozzle will fit. So we'll start small, and if I have to do anything fancy after that, well, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. The first thing I had to do was remove the vise from my mill table. Not a big deal, it's only 2 nuts. However, every time you reinstall it, you need to tram it, it's called. You take a dial indicator in the chuck and you run the table back and forth, and you have to get it so it's perfectly aligned with the table, so when you move the table you're not cutting crooked. So if you own a mill, you're already used to doing that, and it always seems like right after you get it on there and you set it perfect, you end up removing it for some reason. The next thing I had to do was make some 3/8, well, not really T-nuts, but just a piece of flat bar with a threaded hole in it, because I didn't trust this method if the end mill caught. So I wanted to make sure I had a couple bolts in it as well. And what I'm doing is I'm taking the end mill and making sure all the bosses are approximately the same height off the runner. This one I just barely touched. This one I haven't touched. I mean, look at the difference. I mean, because the thickness of the runner is all pretty much the same. That's got to be cut down, so I got to do that on all of them. And then I'll mark and bore the hole and start the tap while it's still in the mill. So I'll do 1 hole at a time. It's going to be a slow process, but there's only 8 holes to do. Now you can do this on the tailgate of your truck with the cordless drill if you wanted to, but he brought it to me because he knows I had equipment to do it. Hopefully a little more accurate. And a real machinist could make this look easy. Me, I'm just gonna hope I have 10 figures when I'm done. And I don't have to buy him a $300 intake. I'm in the groove now. I got it figured out. The tap just has to barely poke through the runner. That allows the nozzle to thread in and stick through where it belongs, and it still, when it starts to get tight, you got about a 1.5 threads to position it and make it tight where you want it. You wouldn't want it to run out of threads and still be loose, so because it's pipe thread. So in this case, these 4 holes worked out nicely. And the nozzle just protrudes down into the runner. Perfect. All right, we got 8 threaded holes. Now I'll take it off the mill, clean her up a little bit, and see what it looks like. Yeah, looks pretty good to me. I don't know what he's putting this intake on, but I kind of like it. I noticed the instructions say the ports could be opened up a little bit because I haven't matched them to a gasket, but they look kind of small. But I like that it's a dual plane, air gap. Still looks good. Probably a really nice intake. I'll be interested when he tells me what he's putting it on. All right, that was a fun little project. It came out pretty well. It still took me all day, plus I still have to clean up a mess, but that's the way it goes. with shooting video while you're working on things, especially expensive things that aren't yours, I try to be extra careful not to make a mistake, like I almost grabbed the wrong drill bit when I went to put it in the chuck. Double and triple check, cell phone messages coming in, you probably go through the same things. A lot of distractions in our lives that didn't used to be there, and you just gotta be extra careful. So it never hurts to make sure you're not making a mistake, but sometimes it still happens, and then it's how you deal with it. So thanks for watching. Getting this project done makes me one step closer to back working on my own stuff, which is really all anybody wants to do, is work on their own stuff. All right, like, share, subscribe. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.